Welcome to Unlock Your Child's Full Potential. I'm Billy, mom of three, positive parenting coach, and your guide to raising kids with connection, not control. Here we talk about parenting without punishments and constant power struggles, building deep bonds, and creating a home where kids want to listen, so you can enjoy family life to the fullest. We all have an attachment style. It's like a blueprint for how we relate to other people. And it starts forming way earlier than you might think. From the moment we're born until around age 5, our earliest relationships begin to shape how we connect with others. In this episode, I'm joined by the amazing Bev Mitelman to explore how these patterns show up in parenting, our romantic relationships, and even how we see ourselves. We talk about how to recognize your own attachment style, whether it can change over time, and how understanding it can bring more clarity, compassion, and connection into your home. Bev also shares the two biggest things we can focus on as parents to foster secure attachment in our kids, no matter their age. This is a powerful conversation that will leave you feeling both seen and equipped with practical ways to deepen your connection with the people you love most. Let's dive in. Hi, Bev. Welcome to the show. We are covering such an important topic today. But before we dive in, I'd love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit. Please tell us about yourself and how you tripped over this work, as you like to say.
Thank you, Billy. It's so nice to be here with you and your audience. I think a lot of practitioners will say that they have a similar story. I grew up in a difficult household and I had a whole bunch of, I would say, challenges growing up. I was very anxious. I knew that I didn't feel good in my body. And so I reached out for help to various different practitioners, like different modalities of therapy like CBT and inner child. I did EMDR, which is eye movement rapid desensitization for trauma release. And it was all very helpful. But when I found attachment theory and attachment styles, that's what made the biggest difference for me for my healing. And so I found this work years ago. And I said, this is where I need to be spending my time. I think more people need to know about this work. So I really believe in people taking and trying multiple different modalities, but attachment theory was really helpful for me.
Did you find it before you had kids or after that?
Oh, excellent question. It was well after that. I had my children, I would say, relatively young in life. I was married around the age of 25. So by the time I was 30, I had two children, two sons. They're both now, to give you an idea of my age without saying it, my two sons are now both away at college. They're at university. You can get an idea. I'm close to 50. I wish I had found this work, many, many years ago, but I didn't. And I believe that I found it when I was meant to find it. And it has made my life and just understanding myself and mending and building stronger relationships with everyone around me, like my children, my partner, my friends. It has just brought such clarity to my world that I'm just incredibly grateful.
Let's break it down. What are the attachment styles and how do they play a role in our relationships?
So first, I always like to mention that everyone has an attachment style. So we're not talking about a personality disorder or mental illness. Everyone has a way in which they interact with others and essentially a template for how we give and receive love. So this affects everyone. Okay, so we have two broad categories. We have those that we say are securely attached and those that are insecurely attached. And within the bucket of insecurely attached, we have more subcategories: anxious preoccupied, dismissive avoidant, and there's a fourth category that's in the middle called the fearful avoidant. Now, I'll go through all of those, but we'll start with what secure attachment actually means. This generally goes back to our earliest years as a child, from the time that we're straight out of the oven, just born, zero, 0 years old to 5 years old. And the way in which our caregiver, that could be mother, father, grandmother, aunt, the way in which our
Babysitter.
primary babysitter, yeah, the child will always identify a primary caregiver, and that's usually the person who's spending the most face-to-face time with the child on a daily basis. So the way in which that caregiver interacts with the child forms a template, a set of patterns in the child's mind that they believe to be the way that they are to give and receive love. If
Can I
a care
interrupt just for a second? Is that the single factor that determines the attachment style, or there are other factors at play?
That's the primary factor. So other people in the household can certainly have an impact. Trauma has an impact. But when we're talking, like, I'm not talking in broad terms about childhood development. I'm just talking about specifically the development of your primary attachment style.
Okay.
So the primary caregiver, many kids are very fortunate to have a mother and a father. But what we often see is one parent usually spends more time with the child face to face, right? That doesn't mean that the secondary parent doesn't have an impact. They do, but less. So in those first years, even before the child is verbal, what they're learning from their caregiver is this is what emotions look like. This is what safety feels like. This is how I can learn to communicate how I'm feeling. I can start to trust myself, right? That if I'm feeling something, I can trust that feeling and I can safely and predictably communicate it to someone and they will respond to me in a healthy way. And so when someone has that type of modeling when they're very young, they grow up into an adult that generally does very well in relationships because that's like their foundation.
And you said 0 to 5. Does that mean that
Yes.
after that you cannot change your style?
Excellent question. Excellent question. 0 to 5 is the age where we are most suggestible. What we experience in those years have the biggest impact. But absolutely, all of us as humans, no one escapes this reality. We all, as we go through life, we experience positive and negative things, right? We like accumulate traumas and they impact us. They certainly do, right? And they can, for example, move our attachment style further away from secure, or if we have a positive experience, we can move more towards secure. So it's not a fixed state. Attachment styles is like a spectrum, and we are able to move the needle from one direction to the other. So I like to equate it almost like everything else in the physical body. When you're born with certain genetic traits. Now, attachment styles is not genetic, but well, I'm going to use this as an example, right? So you might be born, for example, with the propensity to be overweight. Let's just say that both of your parents are overweight. So genetically, you're not in a great place. The likelihood is that you're going to be overweight. But we do know that the body can, especially if you make a true commitment, overcome, what is initially patterned into you. So if you make a commitment and you eat well and you're mindful of getting enough exercise and you make this a part of your lifestyle, you put in the work, you can get yourself to a healthy weight. Over the years, you'll probably see your weight shift a little bit, but where you end up is really a function of your commitment to staying, in a healthy state.
Okay.
Does that
The
make
reason I
sense?
was asking is that I encountered positive parenting when my oldest was 4 years old. So I did some damage before that. And that's why I'm asking, can I foster a secure relationship afterwards with my girl?
100%. 100%. So it's such a great question, and I love your honesty and your candor. This is not at all about blaming parents because it's the hardest job in the world. And I truly do believe that most people, not all, but most people do the best they can with what they have at the time. right? So maybe when your child was younger, you didn't have the tools, you didn't have the knowledge. Maybe you weren't feeling healthy yourself, and so you didn't have that to give. And so you did the best you could for the first 4 years. But you absolutely can, at any point in time, start to reestablish new patterns with yourself and with your children and partners and family and so forth.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
And
I'm still doing that today. Like I mentioned, my kids are 18 and 20, and I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. And so I made plenty of mistakes too. And I've learned that there are better ways to approach certain things. And so that's what I try to do today. You can't undo. I have had a talk with my kids where I've said, I'm sorry that happened. I feel really bad about it. Like if it's something really traumatic or something, it's a beautiful example to say you're sorry, even if it's years later,
how do we
right?
determine our own attachment style? Because we are the ones who influence our kids.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. There's actually a quiz on my website. My website is securelyloved.com. There's a quiz right on the homepage. It says free quiz to determine your attachment style. That'll be helpful. But I will explain a little bit about the other attachment styles. And I think people often go, oh, that's me. They often self-identify because what's really most obvious about attachment styles is generally the amount of trust that you afford someone and your behavior. We talked about someone who's securely attached, right? They do very well in long-term relationships. They're communicative, they're very open, they understand boundaries very well. So relationships are very smooth
Smooth.
sailing for the most part. Yeah, for sure. Now, if we go into the camp of those who come out of a house and they have an insecure attachment style, there's three different types, right? We talked about those that are anxious, preoccupied, or anxiously attached, dismissive avoidant or avoidantly attached. And then the middle category is the fearful avoidant. So the anxious preoccupied is generally in adulthood, we see a lot of behaviors around seeking attention from others, needing a lot of validation, needing a lot of reassurance, needing a lot of closeness and intimacy. When in a romantic relationship, making that like the most important thing in your life. And this really stems from a couple of things. These individuals on an emotional front, they feel their feelings in a really big way. They never learned how to emotionally regulate. And so they rely on a strategy to surround themselves with people because they need to be in proximity to other people to self-soothe. They don't know how to do it themselves. They never learned. We see those types of patterns. These people often feel sad, lonely, they have a hard time being alone. And where does this come from? Oftentimes, this comes from a child who had a very unpredictable caregiver, which means that, let's say a child was raised with an alcoholic, let's say mother. One minute the mother's happy, the next day the mother's passed out, the next day the mother is in withdrawal. So the child doesn't really know what to expect from day to day. So one day they get a little bit of love and they know that that feels good, that's comforting. And the next day they don't have it. And so that creates a pattern in their mind where they're always chasing after that closeness and that love. You'll see in adulthood that this will be, let's say, a woman who, or a man, by the way, attachment styles are not gendered. Men and women, you can be any of the four. So we often see this like in romantic partnerships, they'll have one partner and then there'll usually be a lot of fighting because they're not emotionally regulated and they will monkey branch from partner to partner to partner. They can't be alone. So why does this matter for parenting? A couple of things. Your patterns that you have from your childhood will 100% of the time transmit to your children as a parent yourself.
So these are generational cycles that
They're
keep repeating.
generational cycles 100% of the time, unless you're aware of your patterns and you make an effort to change them. So you're aware of the fact that it's very probable that you'll be overweight, but you're making changes. You're watching what you eat. You're going to the gym. So the same thing can be done, obviously, with your mind and your thought patterns, right? So if you're aware of these patterns, you can, of course, work so that you yourself learn emotional regulation and you don't pass that on to your children. And so the things that are really, really important here is predictability and consistency. In order for a child to feel safe, they need to know most of the time, not perfection, not all the time, but most of the time, they need to know that if they're going to come to you crying about something and they need comfort, that you will respond to them in a healthy way. And what does healthy mean? Like, healthy means that you will listen to them, you will acknowledge their feelings. You will soothe them when they need to be soothed. That doesn't mean that you're going to give in to every silly thing that our kids ask us for, right? So if the kid says, "Oh, I want a cookie before dinner," and you say, "You know better, we're going to have a cookie after we eat dinner." And the child has a tantrum, and then the mother turns around and goes, "Fine, here, have a cookie." And you could say, I understand why you want a cookie. They're tasty. I like cookies too. But let's have one after dinner. Let's have one together. Okay. That's responding, validating what they're saying. Right. Now, not every child gets that particular level of attunement. Right. So I'm going to move now to that's the anxious preoccupied. I'm going to move now to the dismissive avoidant, the child that is avoidantly attached. They were, for the most part, emotionally neglected. Okay, the mother could be on the phone and the child is saying, "I want a cookie," and the mother's not even paying. I'm on the phone. They're not even paying attention, right, to the child. The child often spends a lot of time alone. We also see this style come out of interactions where there's a very overbearing mother. So someone who's very, it could be an overbearing father too, but oftentimes where the child feels extremely controlled, right? Like even like a high demand religion. If a child is part of a high demand religion, or let's say it's a very, very strict household, that child will often develop an avoidant attachment too. In these types of homes, we find that there's very little in the way of emotional vulnerability. So the child never develops any comfort with being vulnerable or intimate, right? It feels foreign to them. It's usually a very critical home where, again, the parents are often very demanding, but not really seeing the child for who the child is, maybe more so for what the child is producing or achieving. And so what happens is this particular individual grows up and they are quite removed from their own emotions. They never learned how to feel their emotions in the event that, and this would have started really young. It was in my day, many years ago, there was a thing where we were teaching parents when your child cries, let them cry it out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, we know now that that's not a good strategy. What that teaches the child is no one cares about me. I'm on my own. I only have myself to rely on. Like in the first couple of years, a child is 100% dependent on their parents. They will, without a doubt, die if they do not get the attention from the parents to be fed, to be changed, to be coddled. That's just the makeup of our species. We do need that level of attunement in the first couple of years. And so if a child doesn't get it, they themselves become very removed from their emotions and they develop a perception, a sense of reality that the world isn't safe. I'm in it by myself. And so you can imagine this child grows into adulthood And they value things like independence, freedom, self-reliance, emotional stoicism. They're the ones that something happens and they just sweep it under the rug and next.
Oh my God, I feel you're describing me right now. Like you said, people know in which category they're in. Yeah.
Right, because the category, this is what happens. People are usually like, "Yep, that's me." And so it's very difficult as these children grow into adulthood, it's very difficult for them to have relationships with others, especially with romantic partners, because again, they're uncomfortable with vulnerability and intimacy. They do trust themselves because they only rely on themselves, but they don't easily trust others. When the avoidant part comes in, that they're quite avoidant to their feelings and to other people's feelings, and also to conflict. If you're in conflict with someone, they might walk out of a room. They might just not answer the phone because it overwhelms their nervous system. They don't know how to handle it. They just push it down. And so, this idea that they're going to be in partnership with someone and the other person is going to rely on them for emotional comfort and support, that's foreign. They didn't rely on anyone for emotional comfort and support. It's like, listen, if you and I are dating and you're having a bad day, okay, well, deal with your bad day and come back to me when you're done. Right? Like, it's not
Right.
my
Yeah.
job.
And I do
Right.
have a happy marriage, by the way, although I'm all these things that you listed.
And I'm sure you do, but I think also even understanding your own patterns can help, right? Because people who are avoidantly attached, when we talk about trauma responses, they have got a very strong flight response.
Hmm.
They flee, they leave. So if you're aware of your patterns, and let's say you're having a discussion with your partner and you feel yourself getting frustrated or annoyed or whatever's coming up for you, you can say, listen, I'd like to take an hour to just calm down. Can we talk about this after dinner?
Right.
And that's reasonable,
What if the other
right?
partner is the previous style, the
Mm,
seeking attention style, and he's the one wanting to be together, and you're the one wanting to just
yeah.
flee?
So this is what they call the anxious avoidant dance, because as luck will have it, those that are avoidantly attached and those that are anxiously attached often find each other in partnership. This is a very common partnership. And there's reasons. I don't know if we have to get into it now, but there are reasons why they find each other so attractive. It's also the same reasons that cause them to fight over and over the same things. So it's important to recognize that both the anxious and both the avoidant feel emotionally unsafe. Okay, they never developed a sense of emotional safety. And so they're both simply trying to regulate their nervous systems, but in complete opposite ways. So the anxious person is coming towards their love interest because that closeness makes them feel calm. And the avoidant person is pulling away because they need to calm by themselves. They don't know how to calm in the presence of someone else. So once people who are in the anxious avoidant dance understand this, they can start to make little concessions. I mean, I work with a lot of couples on this front, right? So you can say, look, I know closeness is important to you. Can't do that right now. Let's take an hour, but after dinner, maybe we can cuddle for 20 minutes on the couch, right?
Negotiations. Yeah.
It's negotiations, right? It's like, give me an hour to calm down because right now it's not a good time. But 20 minutes on the couch, will that be okay? And that's probably a good, that's probably a good compromise.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and by the way, you will start to see these patterns in your children really early. So, how many children do you have?
I have three. And I
You have
think my youngest, she's 6 now, she's the attention seeking one. I recognize this in her, and I recognize this in my husband as well.
okay.
And then my oldest is avoidant, like I am. And
Okay.
I haven't heard the third style, the third insecure attachment
Yeah.
style.
So you have one girl that's 6, and then the second one is how old? A boy or a
She,
girl?
all girls. The second one is 9, and then I have an 11-year-old.
Wow. Okay. That's beautiful. You're very blessed. So the fourth category, I guess the third subcategory of insecure is what's called the fearful avoidance. And this is the smallest category. It's actually the most complex. These folks will display characteristics of both the anxious attacher and the avoidant attacher. And the reason that this happens is because more often than not, these children are coming out of homes where they were abused. This was my attachment style for most of my life, and I couldn't figure out why I was so confused in my mind. But essentially, those that have fearful avoidant, they really do yearn, they desire closeness, but they're also really afraid of intimacy. And so, in a romantic context, they're often called the hot and the cold partner. Like, come,
Mm.
let's spend the night together, and okay, great, I need 3 days to myself. Right? So they kind of go back and forth between wanting that closeness and wanting their space. And the pattern that we see that's so common is if they're coming out of a home whereby they were abused by one or both of their parents or caregivers, the child just simply doesn't know how to make sense of this. So a child will always naturally want to reach out to the parent for comfort, for safety, for consoling. But that person that they're seeking love from is also the person that's harming them, right? It could be physical harm, emotional, psychological, could be sexual. But the child is all too aware of the fact that they're reaching out to the person who's also harming them. So it's like, yes, I'd like a hug, but I'm afraid you're going to hit me.
Yeah.
So,
Or yell at
so it's
me.
like, or yell at me or punish me or give me the cold shoulder and ignore me for 3 days
Ooh,
or
that too.
whatever it is.
Mm.
Yeah, right? Like abuse comes in many different forms. And so the child is yearning for that closeness and also like really afraid.
Hmm.
And that pattern stays with us into adulthood. All of these patterns stay with us.
Whoa, let's
I,
get a little positive out there because for parents who want to be intentional and foster a secure attachment, what are some practical ways they can do that? Let's end this on the positive side.
Yeah, of course. And listen, this is about understanding, how we interrelate with other people. First and foremost, how we interrelate with ourselves.
Hmm.
Because it's an exercise to sit and think about, why do I think the way that I do? Why am I feeling this way? Why does X, Y, and Z make me so upset, right? We all have a set of core triggers, and these are very much related to your attachment style. We also have personality needs, things that we need in order to feel satiated and whole and good. And those are also related to your attachment needs. If you want to foster secure attachment in your children, there's some really important things to do. Always start with yourself as the parent. Understand your own mind, right? Understand which style you have. And if you haven't learned in childhood how to emotionally regulate, then that is a skill that I recommend you learn. It'll be helpful in all elements of your life, but especially as a parent, because it'll help you be a better parent, but then you're also going to model it for your children, which is so incredibly important because I wish they taught this in school.
I wish
But
so
how to
too.
modulate and regulate your emotions is a life skill. Some kids come out of a home and they learn how to cook, and some kids come out of a home, they don't learn how to cook. Some kids come out of a home, they learn how to regulate their emotions, and some don't. So it's okay. If you didn't learn now as an adult and teach your kids. And the second thing that I tell parents is be consistent, be predictable. The scariest thing to a child is, coming home from school and not knowing what version of mom they're going to see today. Is mom happy? Is she sad? Is she yelling? Is she stomping her feet? Is she calling me names? Is she drunk? That's chaos for a child. If you can be consistent and predictable in your responses to your kids, that will diminish their anxiety greatly. Which means that if your child comes to you and they're crying about something, let them talk, validate them, give them comforts, right? That's all the child needs. The child needs to know that you have their back,
Right.
right? You're there to give them a soft place to land, because we then send our children to school and it's a scary world. They need to know when they come home that their house isn't scarier than school. For me, I would have rather just live at school. It was safer. It felt better. Like I wasn't yelled at. I wasn't like it was just it was safer. I don't want to go too deep into this, but watch your kids' behavior, because I can tell you that all behavior as humans is not random. Our subconscious mind is always guiding us to meet a particular need. So, for example, when I was in school, I developed really early on this perfectionism tendency, which meant I got straight A's. I won every award. I was the teacher's pet. And why was I doing all this? Because, and I only realized this, of course, years later, but because I was only given the attention that I so craved as a child when I performed, when I achieved.
Mhm.
So it wasn't enough that I just existed, that this is my child and I love you. No, I would get, like a good for you when I got straight A's and I got the awards so being a perfectionist is how I earned love.
Thank you, Bev. This was so good. I learned so much. Such a great information. Before we go, let people know where they connect with you and learn more about your work.
Thank you so much. So we work with people internationally on tackling their attachment issues and relational distress. We can be found at securelyloved.com. We're a group of certified attachment practitioners. We see folks from around the globe. We also have a presence on Instagram and YouTube.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. If this episode helped you see attachment styles in a new way, please share it with a friend. Let's keep spreading the word and raise more securely attached kids together. I'll see you next time.